Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Today my guest is Jacqueline Antwi-Danso. She's a third-year PhD candidate in astronomy. In this episode, she tells us about her exciting research where she studies the properties of galaxies as a function of time, which can then teach us about the history of our universe. Sounds fascinating, right? Well, she also tells us about the career opportunities available in astronomy and her cures for stress to take care of her mental health. Lastly, she also tells us why she's such a fangirl of Marvel movies. And there's still so much more. Do stay tuned. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi, Anne.
So great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be on your podcast.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, and I can't wait for everybody to hear what you have to say. So in the meantime, let's get into it. Tell us about yourself, your age, your country of origin, where you are based now. And also, I usually do this away from the science, just to get your take. Okay, so currently in South Africa, we're under a lockdown, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning that we can't get fast food or deliveries or takeaways from any restaurants, right? So a lot of people are struggling with it. So I just want to ask you, what takeaway can you not live without if you were in this situation?
Yeah, okay. So my name is Jacqueline Antwi-Danso. I'm 24. I'm currently pursuing a PhD in astronomy at Texas A&M University in the US. I grew up in Accra. That's the capital of Ghana in West Africa. I come from a huge family. So I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm a Christian. My hobbies are watching movies, especially Marvel movies. Please, Marvel, come up with the next movie, please. COVID-19 has delayed a lot of movie schedules, so that's a thing. But I'm anxiously anticipating the next Marvel movie, and I love dancing. I don't have a lot of time to do it now, but in my free time, I try to do it here and there.
Nice. And actually, just let's scrap the food thing. Let's go back to Marvel, because that's pretty interesting. Tell us, who's your favorite and which one was your favorite movie?
Oh my goodness, out of the 20-something or so.
I know, I'm like putting you on the spot.
Which one was my favorite? Okay, honestly, I can't pick one as my favorite because I think that they all have such great storylines. And that's when you say that an action movie has a great storyline, I think that's unusual, because action is the easiest genre to write, really. Like, all you have to do is make a bunch of people punch each other and throw some rocks, and you have a story. Because you can distract people with the visuals, right? And so it takes extra effort to have both a great storyline and great visuals. And I think that's something that Marvel is so great at. So that being said, I think if I would settle on maybe 2 or 3 of my favorite movies, I would say Doctor Strange, and Thor. So Thor 1, 2, and then Thor Ragnarok.
All of them.
Yeah, all the Thors. And that's just because I think for those 2 characters, you really got to see a lot of emotional growth and personal development. So both characters were just very strong-headed, selfish, unrelenting, they cared just about themselves. And then right from the beginning, something bad happens, they are forced to grow up in a certain way, and they end up as these refined characters that then go on to save the world. And so just because of that story arc, seeing how, I think they have pretty amazing superpowers too, but then beyond the superpowers, beyond the action, beyond all of that, what I think really drew me to those characters was seeing how they developed from the beginning when they were just these annoying, cocky guys, to the very end when they are compassionate, they are introspective, they care about people, and being a superhero, it goes beyond them now. It's more about others and not just about them anymore.
All right, that's interesting. All right, so just to bring it back, you mentioned that you've got a very big family. So, I just want to ask you, did this sort of influence, did your family or the environment where you grew up in Ghana influence you into the sciences? And as you talk about that, can you also just give me an overview of your educational background?
Right. Yeah. So I'll start with the overview of my educational background. I did part of my early education in the Republic of Benin.
Oh, okay.
And the other part in Ghana.
Okay.
And in high school, our system is sort of like the French system. So you have these different tracks. You have the science track, you have the general arts track, you have the business track, you have the visual arts track. So I chose the science track. And through my high school counselor, I found out about this Education USA program at the US Embassy in Accra. And that was really where I got the resources that I needed to prepare for the SAT exam, which is a standardized test here, and prepare a strong college application to universities here in the US. So I got a grant and a scholarship to study at Texas A&M University. And then I graduated with my bachelor's in physics and astronomy in 2017. And that same year, I got a full ride to do my PhD in astronomy here at Texas A&M. So that's an overview of my educational background. And did my family play a role? Yes. My family played a big role. So my parents have both been really, really big on education. And that's just because that's something, education is what lifted both of their families out of poverty. So I know a lot of African students have this story of their parents telling them
we can relate.
Stories. I walked 20 kilometers to school with no shoe, and it was because of education that I am who I am today. Those stories. So that was bad. So I grew up being a very, very avid reader. My dad would tell me, Jacqueline, learn something new every day. And because of that, I got lost in books. I got interested in many things, in art, in music, in science, because of my love for books. And somewhere along the line, actually in junior high school, I was in the library one day and I just came across this book. And to date, I cannot tell you the title of the book. I don't remember the title. All I remember was I opened the book and I saw these pretty pictures of stars and things I didn't really know at the time. And I continued reading, and in the book, they were talking about how stars are formed from these clouds of gas and dust, and how they die, and the large ones die in these big supernova explosions. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I think that's my earliest memory of an encounter with astronomy. Really, it was in a book. So yeah, that's it for my family. My family definitely played a role in shaping me into the sort of person that enjoys finding knowledge in books, and it is in books that I think I first discovered, or at least encountered, astronomy as a possible interest.
Okay, so that is actually quite fascinating that you have this very vivid memory of this book, and it seems like your dad was right about you learning something new every day, because I mean, look at how much that influenced your decision and where you are right now. So big ups to your dad.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the field the study of astronomy, like you said, stars and whatnot, it's quite interesting, especially to a layperson like myself who doesn't know a lot about it other than what we see in movies and TV shows, etc. So can you just tell us about your research, because I read up about it, but I want you to explain it because it sounds really fascinating, and also just how you came up to that topic and why it's actually so important to study what you are currently studying.
Okay, that's a loaded question. So I'm going to.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's so many aspects to it. So I'll start from um yeah, what led me here, what led me to choosing to study this. I never was really I never was the student that knew exactly what I was going to do. You know, some students are like, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor, and then they know it from age 5, and they work on that from age 5 till whenever they enter medical school, and they become a doctor and they finish. I wasn't that student. I think I was that person. If you ask me today, oh, I want to be a singer. If you ask me the next day, oh, I want to be a. I remember telling someone at one point I wanted to be a paleontologist, not because I even knew what that meant, but just because I was so sick and tired of people asking me what do you want to be when you grow up, and I felt like paleontologist was a big enough word that it would scare people away. Anyway, actually, um, yeah. So I think one thing I've been really blessed to have is great teachers who are very good at making the subject matter interesting, explaining things in very clear terms, giving the subject matter a sense of awe. And my math and science teachers in primary school were particularly exceptional at this. So in class 4, or in primary 4, the fourth grade, um, we had these cloud observation assignments where we were supposed to observe the clouds, write down what type of cloud we saw, describe its shape, write down the time of the observation, any other necessary details. And if the cloud was anomalous, you had to make an educated guess on what the type of cloud it was likely to be. And that's my first memory of a practical application of the scientific method in the fourth grade. I just found it so fascinating that I could go out, observe something, make an educated guess as to what I observed or why I was observing the thing, test that observation, and then revise my educated guess based on my test. It was just so fascinating to me. I mean, obviously, as a child in the fourth grade, you're not thinking of these things, but later on, I began to realize, okay, this is what the scientific method actually is. That was actually my first real exposure to the scientific method. Yeah. Yeah, and so same with my math teacher. They presented these things to me in a way that seemed like this thing can be understood, it can be pursued as far as you want it to go. It doesn't necessarily have to be consumed in a stratified way. So that stuck with me throughout high school in as I pursued my science studies and eventually came here. And I think my journey, so choosing to study astronomy, it's sort of been a combination of serendipity and just encountering good mentors, good teachers, and taking advantage of opportunities. So we can talk about this later if you want to know more of the details, but I only came to do astronomy actually in my at the end of my second year of undergrad. So I started off doing biology.
Oh.
Yeah. And at some point, mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
And then I switched over fully to do physics and astronomy. So at the time, my undergrad advisor her research was on our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, and she studied the gas in and around the Milky Way. And earlier I mentioned that I found this book and I was fascinated by how stars form. So stars form from these clouds of gas and dust. I don't know if you remember this scene from Lion King where Timon and Pumbaa are lying down and staring up at the night sky, and Timon is like, "Hey Pumbaa, I always wondered what stars are." And Pumbaa is like, "Oh, I've always thought that they were big balls of gas millions of miles away." And Timon is like, Pumbaa, you're overthinking things. And
Yeah.
actually right.
Yeah, I remember that. He's like, nah.
He was like, right? He's like, Timon, he's like, Pumbaa, to you everything is gas, but actually Pumbaa is right. Yeah. So my undergrad research was about that gas around our galaxy and how that gas could potentially be fueling the star formation in our galaxy. So observing that gas by studying the light that those gas clouds emit, and then using the observations of that light to determine different properties of the gas. So how large is the gas? How much stuff is there? So how massive is it? What is its chemical signature? things like that. So that was my first real exposure to research, and that was what my research project was about. And again, at that point, you're not really an independent scientist yet. You are still trying to figure out what research is. I didn't know what research was until I met my undergrad advisor, really. So at that point, her research interests sort of molded mine. And then in graduate school, at that point, I had gotten a taste of what research was, at least at the undergraduate level. So then I decided, okay, this topic is interesting to me. So I chose an advisor that also studied galaxies, but not just the Milky Way, not just our galaxy, but then expanded that to all the other galaxies out there, and there are billions of them. So
Wow.
like there are so many of them. So yeah, it sort of evolved from studying the Milky Way to studying how galaxies evolve on a larger scale. And the idea behind this is if we observe the properties of galaxies as a function of time, we can learn what they tell us about the history of the universe. So the analogy I like to use is if you want to know the history of your family, you go to the oldest people in your family, right? You go to your grandma, you go to your grandpa, you ask them to tell you, your family history. Hey, what did you do in this year, and what did this person do, and how did this person come together to do this? And the same idea applies here. You go to the oldest things in the universe to try to learn about the history of the universe. And so, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So to do this, we can take advantage of a certain property of light. The further back you look in distance, the further back you look in time. So the sun, for instance, when we look at the sun, don't look at the sun, but when you see the sun, when you see the light from the sun, or when you see sunlight, you're not observing the sun as it is now. You're actually observing it as it was 8 minutes ago, because it takes light from the sun 8 minutes to reach the earth.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So it's already happened, basically. What you're seeing has actually already happened.
Exactly.
That is so fascinating. I'm intrigued. And okay, just to go back with what you said, that you go back and look at past other galaxies, to learn the history. So what sort of I don't know if this might be a very off the bat question, but in terms of something interesting, what have we learned from the past by doing that can kind of, help us for the future in our own Milky Way galaxy? I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So because we can take advantage of this property of light, we can study the most distant galaxies. The most distant galaxies are a way to probe or investigate the earlier stages of the formation of the universe. So if you want to know what the universe was like when it was really, really young, really early in the formation of the universe, those distant galaxies are the way to do it. So the specific type of galaxies I'm interested in were formed when the universe was just 800 million years old. And just for reference, the universe is 13.8 billion years old right now.
What?
So yes, that's very old. So we're talking about things that were formed when the universe was just 6% of its age. And what we want to know is, so getting back to your question, what we want to know is what were the physical conditions in the universe at the time? What were the environments of these galaxies like? How much time did it take for them to form? What are their properties? What do their progenitors look like? What do their descendants look like? What do they tell us about how structure formed in the universe? Because the universe is actually it's an interesting place, right? You have smaller things that come together to make bigger things. And so going back in time, the way I described, allows you to create a movie almost. So you're observing galaxies at different snapshots in time, and you're using them to observe how structure has formed over time in the universe.
Wow, that is so cool. That is really cool. Like that is really, really cool. I love that. And while we're on it, I'm sure you learn a lot of things, and as much as it sounds really cool, but there's a lot of us who don't know a lot about your field of astronomy, and I'm sure there's so many questions and misconceptions that people always think about your field. They always ask you. that is obviously clearly wrong, so I just want to ask you, what are those some weird, wild theories that you've heard that you'd love to just bust right now, like, actually this is not true and this is actually true?
Yeah, oh my goodness. You want to get me going on a rant, but I'm going to control myself. So this is actually not a bad one. This is just an interesting one that I hear from time to time. So I think people often assume that astronomers and I think I thought this prior to getting into the field. Astronomers are in their backyards with their little telescope and they're staring at planets or staring at the sky. Or at least that's the picture that people usually have.
Yeah.
And it used to be like that for a long time. But actually, what astronomers do, so what I do on a daily basis, I spend most of my working time just coding.
Coding?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the telescopes I use are not, they don't fit in my backyard. They are 8-meter class telescopes.
Oh, wow.
And that's just a product of, this is a function of how the field has evolved over time. And the more difficult the questions you're asking are, the more complex your technology sometimes has to be to answer those questions. Exactly. So just for reference, for instance, so the objects the kinds of galaxies that I was talking about, if you can picture in your mind right now, the night sky. So think of a night when maybe you didn't even see any stars. It was just dark. Just think of the sky, right?
Yeah.
The galaxies that I study are 10,000 times fainter than that, like that blank sky that you have in your mind right now. So yeah, that's why we need those huge telescopes and those 8-meter class telescopes. And once we get the data from the telescopes, we code to analyze that data, to clean it, reduce it, put it in a form that you can pass through, and then answer those questions that I mentioned before. So yeah, that's one misconception I hear often, that what's you have a personal telescope? And I'm like, yeah, no, for one, they're expensive, and two,
no, I have to say, you have completely crushed that vision that I always had. I won't lie, I'm one of those people, but now that you're telling me, it makes sense. I mean, like, I'm sure even with like that sort of telescope that we're thinking of, you would never be able to see that far into space, so exactly. You had to move with the times and be very well equipped. So all of this stuff is at your research lab?
No, so the telescopes I use are in Chile, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you travel there?
Yes. So I've been to Chile once. I went there once in 2016, and I was supposed to go there again sometime last year, but because there was political instability in the country, I wasn't able to. But thankfully, because most all the telescopes have observatory staff that are operating the telescopes, taking care of them, taking care of the observatories. So you don't always have to go to the telescopes. You can observe remotely.
Okay. Technology, right. Thank God.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually a lot of the data that I've been using for my PhD thesis has been collected remotely.
Okay. Wow, that's very interesting. Okay, so you're in your third year of your PhD, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, meaning that you're soon going to wrap up your studies, and have you thought about your future plans, and in those, and for someone interested, okay, apart from what we've seen from, Big Bang Theory, because we know that Raj from Big Bang Theory is an astronomer, right? I might be wrong, but I think so. What sort of career opportunities are actually available in your field? Because you've already busted that myth of what we thought. So I'd really love to know what sort of other career opportunities are actually available.
Yeah, so fun fact, I've never actually seen Big Bang Theory. I've heard about it.
No.
I've seen the memes. I have friends who are constantly telling me, "You can't be an astrophysicist and not see Big Bang Theory." I'm like, yeah, I know. I'll watch it
No.
eventually. But I haven't actually seen it yet. I plan to someday. I will.
I don't even know what to say to you right now.
I know. You know, this is like my greatest failure as a
No,
scientist.
I'm kidding. I will reserve my judgment and allow you to answer that question.
You know, and when I finally see it, I'll send you a message and I'll let you know that I've seen it. Yeah. So my plans personally after the PhD, I'm really interested in pursuing a career that's centered on research, and whether that's at a university as a faculty member or at a research institution, or at a government facility like NASA, wherever that takes me. I'm not sure yet, but I do know that I want to pursue research as a career. So, what that looks like for me in the immediate future is after my PhD, I want to pursue a postdoc. So, go on to a postdoctoral position in the field. Most people do 1 or 2 postdocs, and each one lasts between 2 and 3 years.
Okay.
So that's what the immediate future looks like. And then after the postdoc, you move to, or I plan to move to a more permanent position. So, wink, wink, NASA, please hire me.
All right, girl. All right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's the immediate plan. And what other career opportunities are there? So the nice thing about being in astronomy is that you get exposed to so many different skill sets. So I mentioned that all of us spend a lot of our time just coding. So you learn a number of computer languages, programming languages. You have to learn a number good communication skills, good writing skills, and so a lot of people end up going into data science, for instance,
Oh, yes.
and working for a company as a data scientist. And some people go into finance. And so there are some people at places like banks and other financial institutions that have a background in astronomy, for instance. Some people go into science communication. People become news pundits, journalists at the New York Times, CNN, etc. Provide expert opinions on public issues, science policy, also the technical communication, managerial skills acquired during the PhD can be applied to other professions, broadly speaking. So Angela Merkel, for instance, the Chancellor of Germany, she has a PhD in quantum chemistry. So just getting a PhD generally gives you, I think, certain transferable skills that can be applied to a wide range of jobs. So yeah, those are some of the things that you can do with a degree in astronomy. Yeah,
I love that. So it's a very wide net. So that's very good to know. And again, like you said, that you are in your postgrad studies, and anyone who's gone through postgrad, it can be overwhelming. So congratulations for coming near the end of your PhD. But what is your own personal cure of stress to take care of your mental health, because that can suffer a lot during this academic journey?
Yeah. Excuse me. So, yeah, right. And it's a PhD can be so mentally taxing, and for me, it's unlike anything I've ever done before. So, having a strong support system has been very important to me and helpful for me. And that support system includes my family, my friends here, even something as simple as coming back home after a long day of classes and then going to my Ghanaian friend who's made some food from home. You just sit down and you eat at each other. Even something like that can be very meaningful and helpful in alleviating stress. So that's number one, just my support system. Number two, my faith. So staying grounded to something that gives me a sense of purpose, gives me peace and a sense of fulfillment is really, really important for me and helping me to just stay grounded. Because like you said, it's honestly being in this PhD has felt like, you're simultaneously floating but then drowning at the same time. It can be very
Yeah, I get that. Oh boy.
yeah. It can really take a toll on you. So staying grounded for me and my faith has been really important to just helping me stay focused and sane. Um, Cinema, like I've mentioned, I love movies. I love Marvel. And just taking the time to do those hobbies because we had a seminar speaker come to the university a semester ago, and one of the things that she mentioned was we often don't think of our hobbies as work because we like to compartmentalize our life into okay, I'm doing work for 8 hours and then I'm doing this other thing and I'm doing this other thing. But then if we schedule the things that we love to do, we begin to see them as work as well because they are just as important to maintaining us, to maintaining our well-being, to maintaining a good state of mind. And so just making sure that I find time to do the things that I enjoy, my hobbies, and not just finding the time, actually making the time to do those things, and has also proven to be very good.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm glad that you have those things because it's hard, but like you said, the end results, is going to be worth it once you get that doctorate, which is so close for you. And speaking of achievements, what are some of your past achievements, past or presents, that you were like, you know what, I did this, and even even then, like you actually were so proud of yourself, past or present, that you just love to elaborate on.
Yeah, and I think there are two things that come to mind when I think of things that I wouldn't say just proud of, but maybe just surprised that I did. Surprised that they happened in the first place. So in my undergrad, I joined this organization called TEDx-TCU. So the undergrad institution was TCU, and if you've heard of the nonprofits called TED, I don't know if you have.
Yes.
Right. So the organization was, I guess you can think of it as like a TEDx branch where we put on TEDx talk. Right. Yeah. Sure. So we organized those events where people could come. So students and faculty and staff would come and then they would give their talks. And for the first 2 years, I was just the director of marketing, helping with logistics related to marketing. And then in 2015, so I was 19 at the time.
Wow.
2015. Yeah, I moved on to the position of curator, and so I secured the license from TED, and to organize the event. And it was it was a lot of work. I can't even begin to tell you. From the process of starting out the speakers, then helping them with their talk, so they would apply, and then you would take them through a number of weeks of training and practice, all in preparation for this big day when they would give their talk to the rest of the university. And it was a lot of work, but so rewarding because the motto was ideas worth spreading, right? So no matter what your background, no matter what your idea is, there was a platform for you to share it with the school and eventually the rest of the world. And so for me, it was just such a rewarding opportunity to be able to organize something that gave people a platform. We had topics from the most mundane things to the most serious things. So people talked about human trafficking, people talked about interracial relationships, people talked about the importance of empathy, people talked about the difference between happiness and enjoyment, the academic cycle of paper, instant gratification, academic regurgitation. We had all these different topics from people of different backgrounds. And for me, at least as a 19-year-old at the time, it was just so rewarding to see this come together in the end and to have a successful event. And to put something together that I felt like inspired not just me, but students at the university, right, and eventually other people who would listen to the talks. The other thing that I'm really grateful that I got to do was this project at the end of my undergrad, where we invited some women from Rwanda. So they were the first to testify to make for the first prosecution of rape as a war crime. And prior to these women's testimony, there was, people knew that yes, rape during war was a premeditated thing, and if you destroy the women, you destroy the culture and all of that. But it had never been prosecuted as a war crime up until the testimony of these three women. They risked everything, their lives, their families, everything, to go up and testify. And we had them come over to the US from Rwanda and then share their testimony to students, staff, faculty at the university. And I just remember that night I was just so, I've never been in someone's presence and felt like, wow, I can't believe I'm sitting in the same room with you.
Yeah.
That's what it was like for me, sitting in the room with those women and just having them share their story. So I'd say, in the 7 years, those are the two things. And maybe the last thing I'd mention is, in the past, at least up until the late 1800s or so, astronomy was largely, it was a symbol of wealth for a lot of nations. So if you had an observatory, it was seen as we're this pretty advanced nation. We observe the heavens. We have observatories to track the skies, to track the motion of the planets, and et cetera, et cetera. And it was largely a Western thing. Now a lot of that is changing, and we're beginning to see more and more African astronomers, and particularly from West Africa, and that's just something that I'm so proud to be a part of, so happy to be a part of. And there aren't very many Ghanaians doing astronomy, and I'm glad, grateful, happy, excited to be part of the people that are changing that narrative.
Okay. Wow. Well, I love how well versed you are and diverse, not only in your academic pursuits, but even in your human-centric approaches and everything that you've done. Also, congratulations on that TED Talk. I know I saw somebody do it and it looked like a huge thing, the TEDx talk. So congratulations on that, and even with everything else that you've done. But I love how you said at the end of these three things that you mentioned that you are happy that you are part of the many Africans in STEM who are taking up these spaces in astronomy, and especially because you are at your very young age. I mean, you are 24. That is impressive to be almost done with your PhD. So congratulations on that. But with
Thank
that,
you.
I just want us to close off this interview for you to just, like, what advice would you give to other people in Africa who want to get into astronomy and be in America, or if not wherever, but just take up these spaces that were in the past seen as such a westernized field,
I think the first thing I'd say is to realize that it's possible, particularly for a young African who's wanting to get into astronomy. And that's something that I have to tell myself even now, and every single day I have to encourage myself. It's possible. I'm doing it. This is happening. It's possible. And it can be hard to convince yourself of that because, again, there just aren't that many of us out there. I remember I went for this outreach event and I was speaking to a number of students from high schools all over Ghana, and one of the students, high schools and some primary schools, and one of the young girls. I think she was just about 7 or so. She was very young, and she said, she asked me, "How come you are doing astronomy? As a young lady, and I'm just so surprised that you are doing this." And I was just so shocked that a 7-year-old was making this point. She said something along the lines of, most of the scientists I see are just men. So like, how come you are doing this thing? So yeah, I think the first thing I want to emphasize and say is that it's possible. And that being said, what avenues do we have? So again, for me, a lot of what has contributed to my journey, my success, me being here in the first place is a number of things. So serendipity, having good mentors and teachers, and taking advantage of opportunities. Some things you can't control, like serendipity, but then other things you can't control. So in terms of taking advantage of opportunities, I mentioned the Education USA program that we had at the American Embassy in Accra. So if you're interested in studying in the US or in any other country, for instance, it would be good to get in touch with programs at the embassy. Often they would have some of these educational programs at the embassies, and through that you might be exposed to resources that will help you get a better idea of what the educational landscape is like, what resources you need to prepare for in your application, how to make a strong application. There are also resources in the form of people. So over the past couple of years, there have been all of these different focus groups, graduate student groups springing up on Facebook and other social media platforms for virtually any field of study, whether you are in the humanities or in the sciences. And a lot of them are quite easy to join. If you just send a request, the administrator approves you, you tell them why you want to be in the group, and right then and there, you are exposed to all these different people who can provide you with guidance on how to prepare your applications and what sorts of career options are available to you in that specific field, whether or not you should pursue the PhD, because believe it or not, you don't need a PhD to do for every field, really. So it depends on what you want to do, and those resources are available to you online, and in those focus groups that I mentioned. So so for anybody who wants to study any STEM field, really, either in their home country or outside, I would say finding out what resources are available to you and then maximizing them, taking advantage of those resources, finding out the information you need to get to where you want to get to, analyzing all your career choices based on the information that you get, and then evaluating whether that is the best decision for you. And that, I would say, is the starting point.
Oh, fantastic. You are absolutely right. You really have to utilize these resources. And I think with social media, it's actually made it so much easier for you to connect with people the likes of you or somebody else, to actually ask them for advice. And I think the thing that I've learned personally is that people are actually willing to help you if you ask. So even if you just pop somebody an inbox, if you can, and just say, "Hi, I'd like to know A, B, C, and D." The worst thing that they could say is, "No, I can't help you right now," or they might direct you to somebody else. But most likely, they will actually help you. So I think you are absolutely right. People are such an excellent resource that we need to use. And I loved that story of what you said of the 7-year-old. That was quite interesting. And I'm glad that there are people like you who are changing this narrative, that actually you can be female and you can be young and you can be African. So thank you so much for sharing your story. It was fascinating. I learned so much, and I'm sure the people who are listening also learned so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. I've enjoyed being on your podcast. You're a great host, and
thank you.
I'm really honored to be here. Yeah, I mean it.
Okay. All right. Well, for everybody out there, thank you for listening to another episode of the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Until next time, bye.
Bye.